Verses 39 and 40 this week, and then the next 2 weeks we'll review this section and then got into it this week to as long as all of Hebrews 11 was. About 6 months. I think it took about a whole year for Hebrews 11. In some ways these verses are easier. In some ways they get harder the further along you get to remember which is commandments, which is law, which is statute, and which is in and which is into, and which is, yeah.
Just ask Mom.
Yes. Which is which? Just keep going over it and you'll have to memorize it. I know, it's good. He comes from code all the time.
You're right.
You said you knew all of them. All right, let's do verse 39 and 40 tonight. So I'll say a phrase, you repeat a phrase. Psalm 119, 39 and 40.
Psalm 119, 39 and 40.
Turn away my reproach,
Turn away my reproach,
which I fear,
which I fear.
for thy judgments
For thy judgments
are good.
are good.
Behold,
Behold,
I have longed
I have longed
after thy precepts.
after thy precepts.
Quicken me
Quicken me
in thy righteousness.
in thy righteousness.
Let's go do it one more time. Psalm 119, 39 and 40.
Psalm 119, 39 and 40.
Turn away my reproach,
Turn away my reproach,
which I fear,
which I fear.
for thy judgments
For thy judgments
are good.
are good.
Behold,
Behold,
I have longed
I have longed
after thy precepts.
after thy precepts.
Quicken me
Quicken me
in thy righteousness.
in thy righteousness.
All right. Let's sing another song. 461. 461. Lord, my shepherd, I'll walk with him always. 461. The Lord is my shepherd, I'll walk with him always. He leads my still water, I'll walk with him always. Always, always, I'll walk with him always. Always, always, I'll walk with him always. The Lord is my shepherd, I'll walk with him always. He leads my still water, I'll walk with him always. Always, always, I'll walk with him always. Always, always, I'll walk with him always. Let's do it again. This time, all you guys can start and sing with me. And then all you guys can start when it says section number 2, you start at section number 1. Sit around. All right, ready? The Lord is my shepherd, I'll walk with him always. The Lord is my shepherd, I'll walk with him always. Always, always, I'll walk with him always. Always, always, I'll walk with him always. The Lord is my shepherd, I'll walk with him always. The Lord is my shepherd, I'll walk with him always. Always, always, I'll walk with him always. Always, always, I'll walk with him always. Always, always, I'll walk with him always. Amen. And I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand. I shall not be moved. All right, let's go ahead and stand for our offertory hymn tonight. Number 456. Number 456. I belong to the King. We are open to reading.
Lord God above, people here in the house of God tonight, we look forward to you when we glorify your name, that we can be perfectly clean as thou art, Lord. Thank you, Lord, for this first day tonight. You just help us, Father, with our trials that we have. We give us strength. Help us to be strong. Thank you.
On that note, turn our Bibles, Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6. Sure, in 120 years, Noah really wanted some showers of blessings. He did. You can see today. You can see today. You can see today. Pick up in Genesis chapter number 6. In verse number 1. Genesis chapter 6 and verse number 1. It came to pass when men began to multiply in the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, and the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. The Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. In his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they had bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. And repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. God said to Noah, The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Room shalt thou make it in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. This is the fashion which thou shalt make of it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, third story shalt thou make it. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven. And everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come to the ark, thou and thy sons, and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee, and they shall be male and female. of fowls after their kind, of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. Thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he. Let's go to Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time to come to your word tonight. We thank you for the example of Noah. We pray that you open up our hearts and encourage us tonight, that we may be steadfast and faithful. Just help us to learn about it. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm going to concentrate a little on verse number 8. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Coming in our VBS, that's going to be the theme verse. We've been thinking about that a lot. I'm asked to preach tonight, so I'm going to do something on this. First of all, there's many correlations between Noah's time and our time. We don't know a lot about what's termed the antediluvian period, that is before the flood. As far as what it is, we do know it says here that mankind was wicked, evil, continually. We do know they lived for hundreds and hundreds of years, so imagine that what they could accomplish in that amount of time was quite great. We know right around this time and after, when such things as the pyramids and stuff like that were built, so certainly their marvels of engineering were every bit as good or better than our own in this day and age. And, but, you know, often that common misconception, if you are just like, oh, that was just a Bible story or whatever, or the whole little cute picture of a tiny little ark with all the animals hanging their heads out of it and stuff like that. Doesn't really happen. If you actually look at what it says how big it was. And done studies have been shown that it is possible, given the size of the ark, to have fit 2 of every kind of animals from which since animals have sprung up and variegated within the species to get the different kinds of breeds and stuff that we have today. It was possible to have fit them all in, especially when you count the fact that even things such as dinosaurs and that kind of stuff were brought on as babies. No reason to bring the largest of the large ones. Besides, they probably would have been too old to reproduce anyway, so you bring the young, those that are just maturing. And so we'll get into some of the other stuff later, but just think about the state of the world then. The state of the world. Verse number 5 says, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Excel talks about this degenerate world. He says, the organic unity of society is favorable to the spread of moral evil. What happened was we had two different things. We had the descendants of Cain, who were the ones of the descendants of Seth, who had followed the Lord. And in the beginning of this passage, we see that they start to come together. And once they did, what's going to happen? You know, if the righteous say, "Oh, I'm going to marry daughter of one of the wicked guys," and help to win them over, well, what usually happens is evil wins over. And that's what happened. That's what happened. They didn't preserve the righteousness of their worship of the Lord, and so it all fell into idolatry and wickedness. And generations go by, and then we know it's only evil continually. So much so, verse 6 says, "It repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth and grieved him at his heart." The native willingness of the human soul to do evil is favorable to the contagion of moral wrong. You know, the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. And so, as our propensity is to evil, so that's going to happen. Everyone's doing that, it's only going to get worse and worse. So we see in our day, the state of the world, not really a lot different than it is today. It's a world in which marriage was abused. Up in these first few verses, we see in verse 2 that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. So you're just marrying people for beauty or for wealth or for fame, not for their spiritual qualities. And so the next generation grew up not knowing God. Marriage was commenced on a wrong principle. It's altogether wrong for the sons of God to marry the daughters of men. It says in Corinthians, be not unequally yoked. Yeah. Trials, troubles. See that physical beauty was made the basis of matrimonial selection. And marriage bond violated by impurity, and the wickedness of man is great in the earth. It's a world in which violence prevails. In verse 4, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown, as those who led by military conquest. Men of physical strength became the rulers of the people. Men of physical strength were the popular favorites of the day. Men of physical strength were the terror of the day. Think of the mythological stories that we have now, things like the Titans and other so-called ancient peoples and stuff. A lot of them came from these histories of the giants and such that were before the flood. Those somewhere. It was a world in which spiritual influences are rejected. Before that, back in a world in which violence prevails, of course, we see that over and over again today. We see those of not just physical strength becoming rulers of the people, but those able to wield financial power, those able to wield powers of darkness. Those able to wield terror. Tragic events have been happening in France, Florida, and things going on in Baton Rouge. More people killed this morning. Other places too. It is a world in which spiritual influences are rejected. This degenerate world had not been entirely left to its own inclination. God had given away to show it. But it rejected the holy influences of heaven, of God. It was in danger of losing the holy and correcting influences of heaven as well. But it's under the immediate inspection of God, verse 5. And God saw. We often we have people in this world, oh, there isn't a God. Or if he is, he doesn't really care about what's going on in this world. God sees. God sees. God sees the heart. It says the same verse 3. It's a world threatened with destruction by God. Verse 7, the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth. Not just man, but beast and creeping thing and fowls in the air. They were going to come under the curse of God because of man's sin. But it was a threat mingled with mercy. Verse 8, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Some lessons, Excel says, we learn from this. To sanctify a long life by true piety, that is, true faith, lest it becomes a means of impurity when we fall. To avoid unhallowed alliances with those who are not following God. And to coincide with the convictions of the Spirit of God. Charles Simeon says, in general, the wickedness of man was great in the earth. Every species of wickedness committed in the most shameless manner. But more particularly, the hearts of men were evil. The thoughts of their hearts were evil. The imaginations of the thoughts were evil. And this too without exception and without mixture, without intermission, for every imagination was evil and only evil, and that continually. What an awful statement. I don't believe we're quite that state yet. Certainly getting there fast. And we call good evil and evil good. Throw out absolute truth, the Bible, in favor for man's changing opinion. Try to change the very laws of nature. But how could this be ascertained? Only by God. Why? Proverbs 16:2 says, all the ways of man are clean in his own eyes, but the Lord weigheth the spirits. See, when we take away the foundation for truth, then what is truth? As Pilate asked Jesus. Is it what the majority says it is? Is it what the laws of the land may be? Peter and the other apostles answered the chief priests and said, we ought to obey God rather than man. And when we depart from having an absolute truth, and every man will do what's right in their own eyes, and every man will do that which is evil, and only evil continually, and they'll call it good. They'll think it's good. But it isn't. Because all the ways of man are clean in his own eyes. Like, oh, we're doing the right thing. We're living right by our fellow man here. Disobeying God's laws. The Lord weighs the spirits. This is God's testimony after a thorough inspection of every human being. The same must be spoken of man at our day as well. What has been the state of your hearts? Pride, anger, impure thoughts have sprung up in them. If occasionally a transient thought of good has arisen, how coldly has it been entertained, and how feebly has it operated, how soon has it been lost? Compared with what the law requires and what God and his Christ deserve at your hands, do we not fall short of our duty? Because all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. What effect this should produce upon us? Humiliation. On review of our words and actions, we have all reason to be ashamed. Who amongst us can bear to have all of your thoughts disclosed to others? Yet God beholds all, and has a perfect recollection of all that has passed through our minds from infancy to now. We ought to be humble. Gratitude. God sent his Son that through him all our iniquities might be forgiven. Jesus paid it all. All to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Fear. Though your hearts are renewed by divine grace, it is only in parts. You still have the flesh within you as well as the spirit. Warring against our members, the Apostle Paul talks about. Proverbs talks over and over and over again about the fear of the Lord, beginning of wisdom, understanding, knowledge. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 through 9. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that after should live ungodly, and delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked, that righteous man dwelling among them, and seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with unlawful deeds. The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment. Ezekiel chapter 14, verse number 12. The word of the Lord came to me again, saying, Son of man, when the land sinneth against me by trespassing grievously, then will I stretch out mine hand upon it, will break the staff and the bread thereof, and will send famine upon it, and cut off man and beast from it. Though these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they should deliver but their own souls by their righteousness, saith the Lord. He goes on to say about the other plagues that he would send upon the children of Israel for disobedience. And throughout each one he says, even if Noah, Daniel, and Job were all in it, they would only save themselves. Yet in the case of Noah, he saved his family too, being from the ark. In the case of Daniel, he saved not only his three friends, but also others in his class that would have been killed by the king. This is the first time. And Job, God restored to him his wealth and his kingdom. And God says in these cases, they would only save themselves. God's given us over and over instances of his judgment and his mercy, and yet we still keep as the people as a whole rejected him. That's the state of the world, both then and now. We see the state of one man. The state of one man. Verse 8, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. And Noah walked with God. Noah walked with God. Kingsley says of this, it says he was a just man and perfect in his generations. Why? Why? Because he was a faithful man.
faithful man. Faithful to God, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. Noah and Abraham believed God and so became heirs of the righteousness which is by faith, as they're talking about in Hebrews 11. Not their own righteousness, not growing out of their own character, but given them by God, who puts his righteous spirit into those who trust in him. Noah was perfect in all the relations and duties of life. A good son, a good husband, a good father. These were the fruits of his faith. He believed that the unseen God had given these ties and had given him his parents and his children, and that to love them was to love God, and do his duty to them was to do his duty to God. The Bible gives us a picture of the old world before the flood, a world of men mighty in body and mind, fierce and busy, conquering the world around them in continual war and turmoil, with all the wild passions of youth and yet all the cunning and experience of enormous old age. Everyone guided only by self-will, having cast off God and conscience, and doing every man that which was right in the sight of his own eyes. And amidst all this, Noah was steadfast. He at least knew his way. He walked with God, a just man, perfect in his generations. There's something wonderful and divine in Noah's patience. He knew that a flood was to come. But he set to work in faith to build his ark, and that ark was in the building for 120 years. 120 years. Well, longer than any of us will live. During all that time, Noah never lost faith. Never lost love either, for we read that he preached righteousness to the very men who mocked him. Even though he preached in vain. 120 years he warned those sinners of God's wrath, of righteousness and judgment to come. No man listened to him. That must have been the hardest of his trials. What else do we see of Noah? Excel talks about him too. He says that good men living in degenerate times are not overlooked by God. Noah found grace in the eyes of God. After God said he's going to destroy everything, and he found the one man. Solomon says, in looking throughout his kingdom and looking to find a righteous man, that he found about 1 out of 1,000. Here, God only found one man and his family. Good men living in degenerate times are often characterized by signal piety and faith. At such times, this is a contrast to those around them. It's a rebuke. It's a testimony. And it's our duty. Good men living in degenerate times are anxious that their family connections may be preserved from moral defilement. We allow our families to go the way of the world, or we try to actively keep them. Pray for them as Job continually prayed for his. Do what we can to ensure that when the flood comes, they're on the boat with us. Good men living in degenerate times perceive the communications of heaven in reference to the destiny of men. Noah heard from God. Noah believed God. That good man is worth the mention and commendation of God. He knows most of the mind of God in reference to the world's future. God told Noah, there's going to be a flood. Everything's going to get destroyed. Build an ark. Save yourself and your family, the animals. I find it interesting. Verse 13. God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through it, and behold, I will destroy it with the earth. Tells him to make an ark, and then down, verse 17, behold, I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, where it is the breath of life from under heaven, everything is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come to the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife and thy sons' wives with thee. So no, look, it's only going to be you and your wife, your sons and their wives. But yet, the Bible elsewhere says that Noah preached righteousness for 120 years. You know, he could have just said, all right, well, God's going to destroy everybody else, so I don't really care about them. Get this ark built, we're going to be ready. Make sure my sons and their wives, my wife, we're all ready to be in the ark and be saved. But he preached righteousness for 120 years. Now, we don't know what all God told him. We don't know. We know enough from what the Bible says of what covenant God was going to establish. We do know from looking at the time periods and the genealogies that Noah's father, grandfather, and great-grandfather all died shortly before the flood. So no doubt had they survived till then, Noah being descended from them in a godly tree, that they may have been on the earth too. Or maybe he knew that they would die before. Maybe, perhaps, there were some that Noah preached to that he thought he'd saved on their deathbed before the flood came. We don't know. Get to heaven, maybe we'll see, but we do know what God says in His Word. And God had just promised him that him and his wife, his sons, and their wives would be saved. But still, he preached righteousness unto others. Now, that word preached, published, made known, doesn't just necessarily mean he went out and preached, as we think of that today, but by his lifestyle. The fact that he still, even though it's 120 years, they mocked at and everything else building the earth, he still was faithful to God. By that, he preached righteousness just through his life. Good men will not be included in the destruction which overtake the wicked. Alexander McLaren calls Noah the solitary saint. Yeah, he had his sons and their wives and his wife. But he said, Noah stands alone in his generations. His generations. His generation is the only one. It's like some solitary tree, green and erect in a forest of blasted and fallen pines. Among the faithless, faithful only he. His character is described, so to speak, from the outside inwards. He is righteous, for discharging all the obligations of law and of his various relationships. He is perfect. His whole nature is developed in all in due symmetry and proportion. No beauty wanting, no grace cultivated at the expense of others. He is a full man, not a one-sided and distorted one. We do not take these words to imply sinlessness, of course. They express a relative, not an absolute completeness. Hence we may learn both a lesson of stimulus and of hope. We are not to rest satisfied with partial goodness, but to seek to attain an all-round perfectness, even in regard to the graces least like our own dispositions. And we can rejoice to believe that God is generous in his acceptance of praise. He does not grudge commendation, but takes account of the deepest desires and main tendencies of a life. Sees the germ as a full-blown flower, and the bud as a fruit. Learn, too, that solitary goodness is possible. Noah stood uninfected by the universal contagion around him. And as is always the case, the evil around which he did not share drove him to a more rigid abstinence from it. Flowers grow on a dunghill, and a very reeking rottenness may make the bloom the finer. Learn too that the true place for the saint is in his generations. If the mass is corrupt, so much more the need to rub the salt in well. Notice again the companion of the solitary saints. What beauty there is in that description of the isolated man passing lowly amidst his contemporaries, like a stream of pure water flowing through some foul liquid and untouched by it, yet not alone in all his lowliness, because he walked with God. One man with God to back him is always in the majority. Though surrounded by friends, we have often found that after all, we live and suffer and must die alone. Here is the all-sufficient friend if we have fellowship with whom our hearts will be lonely no more. Observe that this communion is the foundation of all righteousness in conduct. Because Noah walked with God, he was just and perfect. Thus he is sinless. If we live habitually in the Holy of Holies, if we walk with God, our faces will shine where we come forth. And Moses, when he was up with God on the mountain, he came down, his face was so bright that it covered his face. Noah walked with God. Noah walked with God. Just a few generations before Noah, his great-great-grandfather Enoch walked with God God so closely that God took him, from the sense that God took him to be with him. It was only 365 years of all of his the ones around him lived to be between 700 and 900 years old. So maybe Noah had that example. His great-great-grandfather Enoch. And that inspired him to walk with God. So may we be an example to generations after us. They stayed in the boat with us. Help build them.
Man.
And the son's going to build a boat. Right. Finally, we may think of the vindication of his faith. For 120 years, the witch laughed, and the common sense people wondered. The patient saint went on hammering and pitching at his earth. But one morning, it began to rain. Maybe Noah didn't seem like quite such a fool in the few minutes they had left in their life. The just would look rather different. The water was up their knees. The sarcasm died in their throats. Over their heads came around. So it is always. So it will also be at the last great day. The last great day. Burns talks about his public labors. He was a preacher of righteousness for 120 years. As such, he would have to place their unrighteousness before them. He had to enforce attention to righteousness. As a preacher, he was faithful. He also preached practically by his own example and by building the ark. Yet, he was an unsuccessful preacher, save for his family. Don't be discouraged if we don't see much happen in our own time. Noah did it. But by faith, Noah, Hebrews 11:7, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his house, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Saved his house. Walking with God is to exercise thoughts upon God continually. A conscientious regard to his word and his ordinances. To live habitually in the exercise of spiritual graces, depending on divine influence. It also reports that the attainments and intimacies and joys of godliness are of a progressive kind. As you're walking, right, to your ground, and it comes from God. 1 Peter 3:15-20 says, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear, having a good conscience, that whereas they speak evil of you as of evildoers, they may be ashamed and falsely accuse your good conversation in Christ. For it is better, if the will of God be so, that ye suffer for well-doing than for evil-doing. For Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit. By which also he went and preached in the spirits of prison, which sometimes were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God awaited in the days of Noah, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is, 8 souls, were saved by water." Ready to give an answer, as Noah was. We see that, lastly, the state remains the same today. The world's in the same state. The state of one man is the same. It's still our own choice, our own free will. Are we going to obey what God has said, the absolute truth God has in his word, and he's revealed to us? Or are we going to follow the rest of the crowd and do only evil continually? Our thoughts, our actions. God promised not to destroy the earth by flood again, but he promised he'll destroy it by fire. And that day is coming, a great terrible day, the Lord says. Jesus said in Matthew 24, "Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall 2 be in the field, and the one shall be taken, the other left. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, the other left. Watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord does come." But God says thus, his promises in Isaiah 54:9, "For This is as the waters of Noah unto me, for as I have sworn that the waters of Noah should go no more over the earth, so have I sworn that I would not be wroth with thee nor rebuke thee. He's talking about those that return to him in righteousness. Thomas Boston said, in the most declining generation wherein sin and wickedness have come to the greatest height, God still has some, though few, that retain their integrity. Cleave to him in his ways. It has been found so in all the ages of the church. In the old world there was a Noah. In Sodom, a Lot. Among the children of Israel in Egypt, a Moses, who all retained their integrity and cleaved to the Lord in his ways. When Christ came into the world, there were some waiting for the consolation of Israel. When the Jewish nation was ruined at the destruction of Jerusalem, there was a remnant according to the election of grace. Even in the end times, there are the two witnesses left. How is it that the declining of a generation comes to be so very general, that so very few are left retaining their integrity? That they may be for signs and wonders in the day when they live. The corruption of human nature. Man is deceitful, desperately wicked, his heart is deceitful. No due care in bringing up the next generation in the things of God. You see over and over again the children of Israel where the next generation rises up, they knew not the Lord. Why? Because it didn't get passed down to them from their parents and from their elders. God to take care of the next generation. The corruption of manners thus prevailing, everyone serves to corrupt another until the leaven has well nigh gone through the whole lump. When the generation thus posting on the road of apostasy from God to ruin, the Lord usually takes so many of his own out from among them and saves them. What really fills the cup to the brim is then that persecution of the way of God and the many that were there to retain their integrity in their mercy. We'll see that coming too. Yea, all that the godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. But why are there some remaining such a generation? Because of God's faithfulness and his promises, that he will always save the remnant. Because God will not leave himself without a witness in apostatizing generations. Because therein the power of his grace appears the most illustriously. And the Lord preserves them for a seed to better days, so that the next generation might come in. Says, I exhort you to be perfect in this generation, be persons of integrity, downright for God, rowing against the stream of this sinful generation. Purge your conversation from the gross pollutions of the outward man. Be Christians indeed in the inward man. Be of a good spirit. Be of a gospel spirit, having high thoughts of the free grace of God and deep impressions of the nothingness of man or the evil do. Be accurate observers of your duty to God in the generations that we live in has much cast behind your back. Be nice observers of justice and truth in your dealings with men, for both these are rare to a marvel in this generation as they were of old. Oppose and set yourselves against sin and wickedness in others, as ye have access to do, and so endeavor to stem the tide of the apostasy. Do your endeavor to get a right set in the young generation who are in great hazard at this day. Consider that it is a noble and heaven-like disposition to be perfect in such a generation, to cleave to Christ when the generation is so generally turning their back to him. It will glorify God very much, and that is the great business that we have to do in this world, agreeable to what he has said to us. It is the best service that you can do for your generation. Like David, who served his own generation by the will of God. We suppose it would not be effectual to stop the career of any in their sin, yet it will leave a conviction of sin in their own conscience. It is an honorable thing to be a witness for God, and this is one of the characters of his people. It is the best course that you can take to be safe in the evil day when the Lord calls his generation to account. It'll be most comfortable in dying hour, as it was for good King Hezekiah. Just like in Isaiah 38. Remember now, O Lord, I beseech thee, how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. Noah, perfect man in his generations. Just man. Noah walks with God. Whatever he said of us. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your love for us, where we pray that we may be as Noah, just, perfect, walking with you, getting ever closer to you, even though everyone else in his day, his time, it's only doing evil. Lord, we see that more and more in our day and age, and may we be willing